Locating at the two opposite ends of Asian continents, the Turks and the Japanese built great countries, although their relations started too late. On the one hand, after 5 centuries of domination in three continents, such like Europe, Asia and Africa, the Ottomans began to decline in new history. To be more precise, their failure in Vienna siege in 1683 marked the beginning of the Turks' downfall, and Napoleon's invasion into Ottoman Egypt in 1806 showed the end of Turkish superpower. On the other hand, the Western powers' interventions in Japan in the mid-19th caused it to shift its policy from closed conservative state to the track of integrated nation with rapid modernization. As we can see, both nations experienced great changes from Middle Ages into modern history. Japan turned into a powerful country from backward nation, while the Ottoman Empire weakened and shrank in size after being a mighty nation in the medieval ages. Besides, both countries launched a tremendous scale of restoration policy during this period. For example, the Ottomans under the rule of Sultan Mahmud II began the reformation called Tanzimat in 1839, and it was continued by Sultan Abdülmecit later. Although it had been completed by 1876, it did not achieve significant success. However, the Japanese did remarkably well in their restoration called Meiji. It started in 1867, 30 years later than Ottomans, and completed major process of modernization in just 10 years with huge success. Japan evolved to a mighty nation and put itself on the list of great powers. Thanks to its advanced technology and military achievements, Japan would restore international power balance. For instance, it defeated Russian giant in Russo-Japanese War in 1904 and 1905. The UK offered alliance and bilateral partnership to Japan, while the US had to seize its uneven attitude to the Japanese people and their international rights. With all these, questions can arise about what was their first contact like, how was their first overall relations. They might have come across in the medieval ages, but there is no any applicable evidence, although the Ottomans reached to Indonesian archipelago to support Sultanate of Aceh against the Portugals. Their first contact ever happened in 1878, when a Japanese naval sloop came into Constantinople and welcomed by Sultan Abdülhamid II. A few years later, in 1881, Masahide Yoshida arrived to Ottoman Empire with special mission by Emperor Meiji to establish trade agreements. Shortly afterwards, even a Japanese prince, Komatsu Akihito, visited the Ottomans. At last, Sultan Abdülhamid II used this chance to deepen ties. So he ordered a naval ship called Ertugrul and assigned a company of ambassadors under the commandment of Osman Pasha in 1889. The frigate launched from Constantinople and had to stop over in Suez Canal and Indonesia due to the bad weather and damages to the ship. At last, it arrived in Yokohama in 11 months. The Ottoman officials were taken to Tokyo and welcomed by Emperor Meiji himself with great honor. They had special dinner with the emperor and his family. The Turkish delegates stayed in Japan for a month, and they decided to return despite they were warned about upcoming bad weather. Unfortunately for the Turks, their vessels wrecked and sank because of terrible typhoon. 69 of them survived thanks to the lighthouse near Oshima. They were rescued by Japanese fishermen and carried to save their lives. Japanese Empire immediately showed condolences and brought the survived Turks to Japan. Assigning their own naval ships, the Japanese decided to take the survived Turks to their homeland. Although the Russians and the British didn't like the Japanese ships intervened into Dardanelles, they were welcomed by Sultan Abdulhamid II one more time. Japanese had a monument built for the memory of the Turkish sailors who died in Ertugrul incident to strengthen ties between two nations in Kushumito, which is visited by many nowadays. Thus, Ottoman's relations with Meiji Japan, who belonged to a completely different nation with different culture and religion, was so fascinating. It was based on friendship, trustworthy cooperation, like no any other nations had seen before. However, after the Sultan Abdulhamid II was dethroned in Istanbul in 1909 and Emperor Meiji died in Tokyo in 1912, the two empires found each other in two opposite parties of World War I. Japan sided with the British, putting the country with Triple Entente, while the Ottomans, de facto ruler, switched sides with Germans joining in Central Powers. Total war began, however. They never went into a direct battle or never invaded each other's territory and avoided any commitments. One can say that the far distance did not allow them to do so, but if you look at Gallipoli campaign by the Entente, which targeted to capture Dardanelles and Ottoman heartland, the invading forces under the leadership of Britain were joined by Australia, New Zealand, British India, France and its colonies, and other international forces. Thus, the Japanese also would readily have joined in this massive campaign as an ally, but they didn't. Nevertheless, after the war ended like other members of victorious Entente, Japan also insisted capitulation from the Ottomans, which soured their relations. After the Ottoman collapse in 1922 and foundation of the Republic of Turkey in 1923, diplomatic relations were re-established in 1924. They opened the first embassies in 1925. Japan was actively practicing this policy on international stage, inspired with the idea of uniting the whole Asia under its rule. On that target, Japan generated puppet states in the territory of former Chinese Empire and Eastern Mongolia, supporting independence of Eastern Turkestan. From there, they would support Central Asian Basmachi movement who were fighting against Soviets for independence. Tokyo had special plans for Eastern Turkestan of China and Central Asia of Russia. The Japanese planned to create Great Turan State under the rule of Ottoman descendants, uniting these regions to tear Russia and China into pieces. Emperor Hirohito summoned one of the Ottoman princes who was in exile in Syria in 1933. His name was Abdul Karim and he was the grandson of Abdulhamid II. When he came to Tokyo, he was explained about the idea to re-establish Ottoman Empire, yet not in Turkey but in the land of Turkish relative nation, Turkestan. But their plan soon failed, because the Russians invaded Eastern Turkestan, noticing Japanese threat in 1934, and Prince Abdul Karim was found dead in Cadalic Hotel, New York in 1935. Japan was an active participant of World War II with high inspiration, while Turkish Republic stood neutral, although it declared war in Japan in 1945, just symbolically. During the modern history, Japan and Turkey showed even more significant stories in their romantic relations. It was at the heat of Iran-Iraq war. All the aircrafts were being shot down. To rescue 215 Japanese who were living in Tehran, Turkey sent an aircraft. Turkish government stated that we have not forgotten the rescue of the sailors of Ertugrul ship. Thus, once we heard there were Japanese citizens in need of help, we rushed there to rescue them. The two countries still have very close relations today too. Turkey and Japan Friendship and Culture Association has been promoting their amicable relations through arts, seminars, and cultural exchange since it was founded in 1926. Besides, Ertugrul Incident Monument and Ottoman Heritage Museum exist in Kushumito. The two countries celebrated the 120th anniversary of their first contact in 2010 with high spirit and held 189 events throughout the year. Moreover, the Japanese held Turkey Year in Japan in 2003, while the Turks held Japan Year in Turkey in 2010. Besides, 2019 was the year of Turkish culture in Japan one more time. Surprisingly, both countries experienced a terrific natural disaster in 2011, earthquake. Japan even had catastrophic flood at the same time. During that hard time, they showed sympathy to each other and supported and provided with aid with any means. All in all, the Japanese and the Turks have had marvelous relations even in a very short time, starting with extraordinary events. They did their best at all stages of their history to keep great relations even in the hardest situations. They avoided all the direct conflicts between them. The two nations love each other nowadays. To my thinking, no other countries had such sincere relations in history. Anyway, friendship is the best all the time, and it's much needed phenomenon today.